Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. This episode is essentially a prelude to the live that I'm going to be doing tomorrow. It's on the subject of Chris Watts' psychology, and we are trying to again understand what is going on in his mind. Now, I've actually just gotten an extremely scathing review, a pretty horrible review on the last book that I've written. Someone just sort of undermining my credibility, you've got no business in true crime, etc., etc. And that's fine. If you feel that way, you're welcome to ignore everything that I do. They sort of, what part of the criticism is saying, there are a lot of other experts in this. There are psychologists, there are body language experts, there's this and there's that. You're not the only person, you don't know everything, kind of thing. And that's true. I'm not a body language expert, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not this, I'm not that. But one thing that none of those people are, they haven't written books on lots of true crime cases. And in the same way that someone like John Douglas becomes a profiler by speaking to lots of criminals, you can also learn to profile the criminal mind by studying many, many cases. And when I say study, I don't mean make a YouTube video about it or write a blog post about it or think about it or Google it. I mean, write a book and write another book and write another book, and then that's one case. Then you write another series of books. So, for example, when you write a series of books on the JonBenet Ramsey case, and then you learn that case inside out, then you write a series of books on the Madeleine McCann case, you start to feel the crime in a way, in an insightful way that I don't know how many people do. When you know one case inside out, you know another case inside out, you start to see what I call intertextualities. That's a true crime rocket science ism. No one else really refers to that. And then the same applies in lots of other cases, whether it's Casey Anthony, Jodi Arias, Chris Watts, Amanda Knox. When you start to write several books on those cases, you get to know the same tactics, strategies, and things that are going on. And that, I think, is the value of what I'm talking about. The person leaving this negative review is obviously someone, I guess, who doesn't like me or whatever, but, you're 100% to say, you're not an expert, right? But I am an expert in true crime based on working in it full-time for more than 7-8 years, and based on writing 100 books, although not all of the 100 books are about true crime. But it certainly teaches you to understand people, and it teaches you to understand the criminal mind. And so as a way to address that, and this is what I feel, I've got to do over and over again. Every time I'm criticized, every time I'm undermined, every time my credibility is brought up, I think it's important to answer it. And not so much to the people who are critics, because I don't think they will change their mind, but to the people who are undecided, the people who are, well, who are you? I don't know what's going on with this case, and I don't know whether to trust your voice on it. And this is to address those people. So in this episode, essentially what I want to do is take one post that Shanann did on December 15th, 2017. It was around about 8 months before she died and before the family was annihilated that this post came up. And what I want to do is take one post that she did, and I want to try and create a couple, like a spider web, linking this post to things in the discovery where Agent Tammy Lee asks him, what are the different ways that somebody could be killed, right? I want to look at the things in the discovery where it refers to he would kill for you, right? Those references. And then I also want to bring it back to, did Chris Watts have a fear of what Shanann might put on Facebook? Did he have a feelings of resentment one way or the other. Okay, so we're going to look at all those things. And then as a lead up to the live that I'm going to do tomorrow, that I want you to see me face to face. I want you to ask me questions if you like, but we're going to deal with Chris Watts' psychology in its own place, in a separate episode. There was somebody on YouTube who said, I just don't understand why he did this, and this is now more than 2 years after it's happened. And if you've been following the Watts case for 2 years and you're still asking that question, it's really time that you get the answer to it. I don't know where you've been. I don't know what you've been thinking about. I don't know who you've been listening to. If after 2 years you still say, I don't know why I did this. And we're going to address that question, but through his psychology, in the live tomorrow. Essentially what I try to do, whether it's in my videos, whether it's the blog post, whether it is the books, I try to lead you through the information. So all the time I'm showing you, like I'm doing in this video, I'm showing you snippets of information, and I'm saying, well, that links to that, which links to that, which links to that. And when I look at it, this is what I think about it. And I think about this based to some extent on logic, but also to some extent, and I might reference another case or another situation. It might be from my personal life. It might also be from another high-profile case. You might or you might not have heard about it. It might be to contrast what Chris Watts is doing, or to show a similarity, and then say, well, what do you think? Do you agree with that? And that is really the methodology that I'm using. So before we get started on this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Those who have subscribed, I think there's been about 100 since the previous video. Welcome to the channel. Please like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So we're going to come back to this image that Shanann posted in a moment, but I want to bring up two references to kill for you. Right, it's obviously a little bit of a different meaning on what Shanann's talking about, but it is where Addie says to Shanann, where Shanann is feeling bad about things that she said to him. She said something about, I did belittle him without realizing it with his parents. I think this is all communicated on the 12th, somewhere around there, but very close to the end of her life. And then Addie trying to encourage her, trying to support her, trying to just show that, don't worry, it's not that bad. I think he still loves you. Don't give up, kind of thing. Addie basically said he would kill for you. And I think if you take that psychology literally, then you can imagine it from the perspective of his allegiance, his loyalty, his love, his commitment has sort of swung like a pendulum from Shanann to Nicole Kessinger. And now it is literally, perhaps he would have killed for Shanann literally at one stage. But now it has gone to the other end of the pendulum. He will now literally kill for Kessinger because that's who he loves. And obviously this doesn't mean literally Shanann asking him, will you kill this person for me? Just that he would go to the ends of the earth for her. It also doesn't mean that Kessinger would ask him to kill his family for her. And the crazy thing is there are some people who literally think that that is true. And I think those people are caught up in the fairy tale of this case. They think about it perhaps in a symbolic way and in a theoretical way. They don't think about it literally. I mean, would you want to make a life with somebody who's just killed his pregnant wife and his children, and now you want to marry that person, live with them, and have children with them? I don't know how many women in the world would want to do that, but if you think that that is what some other woman would do, I think you're crazy. But I think if you do think it through, that is the logical thing to think. Now I want to reference a letter that Shanann wrote. She said, and I'm not 100% sure if this was the final draft or the first draft, but the point is, she wrote this down, she was thinking it, and she wrote, I can't lose you and I won't lose you without a fight. I will fight for your love, fight for us. And then she said, I can't imagine life without you. It scares me to death. So that's also a statement that I think it was either something that they regularly used, both of them, Chris Watts and Shanann, or to something she used and then he picked up from her. But you definitely get the scares me to death thing coming up a few times, that Watts felt scared to death about the third child. That comes up, the third baby, that comes up in the texts a couple of times. He literally uses those words, and it also comes up in the discovery. I think somewhere along the line he says, I'm scared to death that something has happened or something like that. But she says, scares me to death every day you go to work or we are apart, flying away. Now, I think this letter had the opposite effect on Chris Watts, saying, I can't lose you, I won't lose you without a fight. I think if he wanted to get a divorce, if he was seriously considering a civil separation, this letter was communicating something else, that I'm not going to let you go easily. And it may also have suggested to him, if something is going on, you're not going to get away easily, or you're not going to get off lightly. I think you can also look at it in another way, which is Chris Watts may have felt the same way about Kissinger. I can't lose you. I won't lose you without a fight. I will fight for your love. I will fight for us. And obviously the way that he implemented that, the way that he executed that, was a disastrous, a catastrophic, a horrific result, wasn't it? But you can imagine if someone is using those words, I can't lose you, I won't lose you without a fight, I'll fight for your love, I'll fight for us, exclamation marks through there everywhere. I can't imagine life without you, it scares me to death. You can imagine a situation where someone's trying to get out of the situation, is also scared to death. I don't want to have this third child. I don't want to be involved in this marriage. I want to get out. I'm stuck in debt. How do I escape this whole mess? And then this horrible, tempting thought comes through of, well, murder is a permanent, quick solution to everything. I just murder you and then I tell a story and then I can get my happily ever after. That is part of his psychology, but it's obviously not all of it. And so I think if you want to understand the psychology that we're talking about, if you want to understand what's going on here, you can't impose your psychology, the people you know, into the situation. You've got to let who these people are speak for themselves. And I really do feel people have lost the capacity to look at another person and understand who they are on their own terms. So, if someone's an introvert, to say, you are not like me. If someone is a man and you're a woman, well, you are not like me. You think in a different way. You operate in a different way. If you're a man looking at a woman, you could say the same thing. You're a woman. You think in a different way. The way that you work, for all intents and purposes, is in a different way. And I think we're constantly imposing ourselves on others, saying, I'm like this. Why can't you be like that? I think this way, why can't you think that way? This is my world, this is what makes sense to me, why does it make sense to you? And I think only when you put yourself in that person's shoes and you let that person just be themselves, then you can get a sense of where they're coming from and understand that. And sometimes we just don't want to do that. We don't want to understand where someone else is because we want someone so much to understand us, and where we're coming from. And repeatedly, Chris Watts says, I couldn't be myself around her. Agent Coder says almost disparagingly, almost contemptuously, why couldn't you be yourself around her? And then he talks about walking on eggshells and all that kind of thing. And I understand when you go down this road, it sounds like, wow, you're being far too compassionate about this evil person, this pig, really. You're being far too... You're reaching out your hand. It sounds like you pals with this guy. You want to give him a hug. No, it's just true crime. It's just figuring out someone's identity and saying, well, this is why this happened. And you can do it one time and someone, or population or group of people or your audience can go, I see what you're talking about. or you can do it 100 times and eventually the message comes through. So the opposite phrase I was looking for, where Chris said something about to death in the discovery, when he was talking about what happened, he said, I love those girls to death. And that might be something that he would say often. It's not something I say very often. I don't think I would say I love my dog to death kind of thing. But it is possible that he appropriated that from Shanann. I don't know how people speak in North Carolina. I don't know if it's a North Carolina-ism. I certainly don't speak like that. I don't know whether Chris Watts habitually did. We would know if we could speak to his friends, but we certainly know that Shanann spoke that way and that apparently he did too. Did he appropriate that from Shanann, or did he speak like that anyway? In any event, it was a very ironic thing to say, because he didn't love his girls to death. He loved his girl, Nicole Kessinger, to death, which is why a big part of why he did what he did. On August the 7th, 2018, at about 70 minutes past 5, Shanann texted Addie, Chris told me last night he's scared to death about this third baby. And I believe those were his words. And bear in mind, at that point, he'd already made at least one attempt on Nico's life. He was so scared to death that he was literally trying to kill the third baby. And this is a precursor to the annihilation. Watts is trying to get rid of the baby. Shanann doesn't want to get rid of the baby, and she's kind of thinking, well, I want to keep the baby. I've told everyone on social media about the baby. What can I do now? And whether Shanann wanted the baby or not, I think felt she was kind of in a bind. Chris Watts felt a little bit differently about it. He felt, I absolutely don't want this baby. He may have felt, I can't afford it. He may have felt, I don't love Shanann anymore. And he may have felt, more than anything else, Kessinger's not going to accept it if there's this baby. And there's the whole debate that she knew all along that she was pregnant. If that is the case, then I think she may have suspected or been told that the baby wasn't his. Otherwise, I don't understand why she would go along with it. If you just use normal human psychology, if you meet someone, you haven't known them all that long, or maybe you have known them for quite a while, and you want to have a relationship with them, and it turns out they have impregnated somebody else, isn't that a threat to your relationship with that person? And if you know that they've impregnated that person, you're going to want a reason or a response. Are you still committed to them? Aren't you going to need to raise this child with this person? Aren't you going to be in a permanent relationship with them because didn't you have this child? Isn't that a show of your commitment? And so you're going to need a response, and the response is going to be something like, it's not my child, or, well, I didn't, she tricked me into having the child, or some kind of lie or whatever. But you're not going to willingly go along with someone if you want to have a serious relationship with that person. And that's the part of the arguments that I don't really understand. That Nicole Kessinger is this horrible person because she went along, she had this affair with him knowing everything. And it basically lets Chris Watts off the hook completely, that he was completely honest with Kessinger, that she knew everything. And I don't know, I just don't think it meets that bar for human psychology. There is often a lot of jealousy in a new relationship. There's a lot of jealousy. Are you with someone? Are you interested in somebody else? Are you committed to me? And then there's also the flip side of, well, I've just met you. And it can be very, very strong, even unnaturally strong in the first few days or first few weeks. But it can also be a sense of desperate love. I want to desperately keep you. I want to secure this relationship. I want to be absolutely sure that this is the real thing, and you need to prove it to me. Now, something I want to ask you guys, I've heard about misogyny, men who hate women, and I think it's a real thing. You do get misogynists, you get serial killers. I mean, the Ripper, I think, is an example of that. You get incels, you get the whole incel culture. But what about women who hate men, and also women who hate women? I have certain, not in a big way, but I have certain feelings of jealousy or envy in terms of other men, but not something that keeps me up at night, not something that I dwell on, not something that is particularly high on my mental programming, right? If it's even there. But what about women who hate other women? And I don't know what you call that. If men who hate women is misogyny, what is women who hate other women? And also, what is women who hate men? I get quite a few women who hate on me because I am not as anti Chris Watts' mistress as they want me to be. They may think that I'm victim blaming Shanann, or that I'm not supportive enough of Shanann. So I'm this despicable male person. But it just makes me think, is there someone in your life that has treated you unfairly? Have you been spurned on in your marriage or cheated on in your marriage? Perhaps none of those things. But it just seems a lot of hatred towards me for telling a story and just for trying to look at something in a sincere, authentic way. And bear in mind, it is my job. So someone might review your work. I don't know if they would, maybe let's say you sold bread for a living. Can you imagine someone just twisting everything you do in terms of your baking bread in sort of a, I don't know, it's difficult to explain. But obviously it goes with the territory. In true crime, you're going to have to deal with people who take it up personally and do. And it is personal. Crime is personal. The psychology is personal. The people that were affected were real. This isn't a soapy, this is real. And I think it's touching on the real feelings and emotions of you in your life, of other people in their lives. So when I was going through the discovery, and I often do targeted searches, so I was searching for the words "to death." And one of the things I came up with was where Tammy Lee says to him, what are some of the ways you could make a person disappear? And he said, well, I don't like to think about it. And it's actually interesting that that she's got to sort of explain to him, well, one of the ways you could make someone disappear is by murdering them. And Chris says, oh, okay. And it's quite interesting how he plays the game of, well, he's the last person to think about that. So if you're going to talk about ways to murder someone, he's not going to talk about strangulation first or smothering first. So he starts off with, you can stab someone, shoot someone, hit them with a blunt object, use a weapon like a gun or a knife. And all of those things that he mentions in the beginning, I think you can exclude from what he did. I think if you want to look at what he did, you've got to go to things like poison and luring them into a trap and a kind of a stealth attack. And that does come up in that paragraph right towards the end, as she pushes him. What else could you do? What else could you do? And poison comes right at the end. And that is what I believe he tried to do with Nico, and it's also possible that he tried to do that with the children. Just a final thing I want to bring up before we get to that image is on page 605 of the Discovery, Coda says something, and Coda is obviously trying to ingratiate him with Chris Watts, make him comfortable, keep him talking. And at this point he said, well, I'm sorry for lying to you. And of course he carried on lying, and he's still been lying subsequently. He lied during the second confession. Chris Watts has never ever come completely clean. He's just revealed a piece of the puzzle here and there as time has gone on. Anyway, on page 605, he says, I'm not a good man. Coda tells him he's a good man, and Chris Watts says, I'm not a good man. But I think where he is now in prison, he thinks he is a good man, or is good enough to come out of prison one day. I think it's just quite interesting how Coda is trying to get into his mind there, saying, look, you're a good man, you're a good father. And then he in a rare moment of authenticity, he says, I'm not a good man. And that's true, he is not a good man. What he did there is the full and final evidence of that. And you can't now tell little stories and come up with something in an appeal that is going to challenge that. He's not a good man. That is the bottom line. So what I want to address now is this Facebook post that Shanann put up. She is sitting in the lounge, I guess. She's perhaps on the floor with the children, and Chris Watts is watching TV while exercising. His attention's not on Shanann. He doesn't know what she's doing. He's focused on his exercises, and he's wearing a patch, and he is preoccupied. And Shanann sneakily takes a photo of him. He's wearing his glasses, and she says, this gives us a little insight into his life, into their life. And it is basically, he's working out, she's not working out with him, and this is what's going on at 9 o'clock at night. Probably the children are in bed, right? And he's doing push-ups, sit-ups, and Shanann is using that to pun thrive, and she uses hashtag thrive with duo. But what I think is going on here is possibly he may already have been thinking about Nicole Kessinger or something. I don't mean in the sense that he's already in an affair with her. I mean, I'm not even sure if she was working at Anadarko at this stage. I mean, he's losing weight, he's enjoying the attention he's getting from other people, the compliments that he's getting, and he wants that to continue. He's getting a sense of himself, and obviously in his fitness journey, it's something I've spoken about before, he's going on a journey that's separate from Shanann. He's getting a sense of himself. He's getting a sense of control over himself. He's getting it's a small area in his life where he's not being told what to do, he's not being controlled, and he can change himself, he can transform himself, and that is a precursor to what came on later on, which is, I want to transform even more. I want to transform my life. I want to live in a different home. I want a different family. I don't want this. And I think the fitness journey went on, showed him that what was possible, that with effort, with focus, you can make changes. But I think there was still a weakness in his social skills, and you've got to ask, where did that come from? And we're going to deal with that in a moment, not in a lot of detail, but we're going to deal with it in more detail in the live that's coming up. But this is the part that I want to emphasize, is she says, Chris may kill me for this picture, but it's okay. And in the title image, I've just put a picture of Chris. It's blurry. It gives you a sense almost of the Chris Watts in the post-truth of the fuzzy post-truth of this case. Chris Watts, if you could imagine him still alive, standing next to his home, even now, if he could step out of prison, if he could go back to that driveway, if you could do an interview with him, what would he think about? Well, perhaps he'd think about that he was afraid that, bear in mind that Shanann was still going to have this child, despite his efforts to get rid of his child. And obviously what was going to happen then was she was going to post it on social media. The gender reveal, that was about to happen. And for whatever reason, and when I say for whatever reason, it could be that Nicole Kessinger didn't know about it then, but it could also be that her friends didn't know about it, and if her friends knew about it, then she wouldn't want to be in a relationship either. It might be that whatever he'd explained to her, she might accept, but she couldn't deal with it if her friends knew. Wow, you dating a guy who's married and his wife's pregnant. Wow, that's not right. That's not acceptable. And I think it's possible that this kind of thing would have been the deal breaker. It doesn't really matter what the actual issue is. The issue is Chris Watts felt that it couldn't be allowed that Shanann post something about the pregnancy. He'd asked her not to do it. That's also in the discovery. But look at this thing that she says here. Chris may kill me for this picture, but it's okay. In other words, what Shanann's showing is she will appropriate what someone else is doing. And obviously she means it in a fun way, for it's not really a big deal. And for a lot of people, social media isn't a big deal. You take photos of everything, selfies of everything and of everyone, and it's not a big deal to you. But for other people, it might be a big deal. Some people want privacy in their private lives. I'm one of those people. Some people want to keep their personal life private. I'm one of those people. And you feel very impinged upon when someone else who's not an introvert, who has a different approach to social media, just does whatever they want to do. And so I think it's very underappreciated in the Chris Watts case. I think you could make the case that Chris Watts murdered Shanann because he couldn't stop her from putting something up on social media. I don't think that's the full story. I don't think it's just that. I don't think it's I think the debt is also relevant. I think the fact that Nicole Kessinger had probably given him a key is also relevant. But I think what is very underappreciated is this whole thing of someone who's socially weak being outed on a social network and then being put in a untenable position because of something on social media. And you try and reason with this person, but they don't. They do whatever they want. And so also Shanann's letter saying, I will fight for you, whatever. You can imagine part of that fight is going to be conducted on social media. And I think this terrified him. A lot of people, I think, feel that he did what he did out of anger. I feel like he was primarily motivated by fear. Fear of what Nicole Kessinger would think, fear of what everyone would think. And somewhere in the discovery that does say, what is it going to look like? Meaning if you got divorced. So those people who criticize him say, why didn't you just get a divorce? He was wondering, what is this going to look like? I want to get divorced. Kessinger wants me to get divorced. But Shanann doesn't want to get divorced. What's this going to look like? And to me, the irony with this is that so many people just don't see it. They talk about narcissism all the time. And if you go to page 599 of the discovery, Coda, at this point, he's talking about having the affair. She accused me of it. I denied it. I feel horrible for it, like she was pregnant. So he feels horrible about that, but he doesn't seem to feel horrible about the murders. Right? He says, I cheated on her, I hurt her emotionally, but I didn't do anything else. Right? But then when Coda's gotten him to admit to the affair, then he says that Kessinger was a wonderful person. She knew he was married and was having issues, but he told her he was getting separated. He didn't know what that was going to look like. That was the problem. That was what he was faced with. And you might laugh at that and say, I got divorced, it wasn't very difficult, or it wasn't a big deal, or you just get a lawyer, whatever, but you're not an introvert. You're not someone with very few friends. You're not someone who's only had one or two relationships in your life. And so for him, it was a very big deal. Yes, he didn't know what it was going to look like. It was going to be Divorcegate on a scale unimaginable compared to Nutgate. It was going to be this huge conflagration. And that was the thing. He didn't know what it was going to look like. What was it going to look like if Shanann gave birth to this child? What was she going to say on social media with Thrive and everything else? What was that going to look like? And what is interesting is the first reference to what is it going to look like is on page 599. The second reference is on page, is it 610? Or is it before that? It's on page 608, where Coda's now, they've gotten to the point where he's admitted that a lie, he's blamed it on Shanann, and now he's talking about taking the bodies out of the house. Now he says he was scared of what everything was going to look like, meaning the murders now, right? So you've just had a reference to what is the divorce going to look like, now what is the murders going to look like, right? And that is why the two go together. He was scared of what the divorce was going to look like, that's why he committed murder. How did he commit the murder? Well, he hid it in the fabric of going to work in a normal day. That's the other thing that people who think that they were accessories just don't see, is how the heck do you hide a crime of this scale? 3 people plus an unborn child. How do you hide a crime like that away when you involve another person? You simply can't. You simply don't. And Chris Watts didn't have other friends, and he certainly wouldn't want to involve his own his own girlfriend in something as hideous as what he was doing. You know, he was doing it so to almost take the baby out of the equation, and then he felt he had to take everyone out of the equation. And he did this because he was perhaps sleep deprived, perhaps not the most clever or experienced person in the world, but also think he did it the same way drug addicts do certain things. He did it out of desperation. He did it in a sense almost of panic, that he had to do something. But if you take just those sayings, what was this going to look like? And also what was it going to look like if they did get divorced? It shows someone who's terrified of what other people think. He's terrified of what Kissinger could think, but he's terrified of what people in general, society, the people of Frederick, his colleagues, what are they going to think? And in order for his fairy tale to work, he needs everyone to sort of endorse it. Oh, well, my wife left me. She was upset. We had an argument. She walked out. She took the kids. I don't know where she went. And so he thought that would look better than perhaps Divorcegate, a lot of gnashing of teeth on social media. And if we come back to this post that Shanann posted, Chris may kill me for this picture, but it's okay. You can imagine that same attitude with the gender reveal. Chris may kill me for putting this up. He didn't want me to, but it's okay. Here it is. And that is now going to ruin his plans. And that's what he wanted to prevent from happening. So I want you to think about it, answer it in the comments. Do you think Chris Watts killed Shanann when he killed her? Bear in mind the gender reveal had been moved, but it was ultimately going to happen that Monday. Do you think that played into the timing of the murders? Do you think it played into why he committed the murders? The flip side of it, and it obviously isn't just that, the flip side of it is, and this addresses people who say, I just don't understand. You know, we 2 years and almost 2.5 years from the crime, people who still say, I just don't understand why this happened. I'm going to provide you with a small answer to that. And it comes up at least 3 or 4 times in the discovery. Other people referring to Chris Watts as an introvert. His boss, Cassie, and Nicole Kissinger. And I can bring up more references in addition to that if you like as well. From the Lindstroms, from Chris Watts himself, using that word, from Shanann using that in her social media, in Facebook posts. And so you've got 5 different people, all of whom know him very, very well. Chris Watts himself, his wife, his girlfriend, his boss, and one of Shanann's friends and other friends. And so why do you need to go to a psychologist to find out who he was when we know who he was? We know what he was. But you've got to think about it in a deep way. So he was an introvert, but she wasn't. So what are some of the traits of an introvert? They're reserved. They don't want to get out of their shell. They don't want the world to know everything about them. They don't want to be on display. They don't want to, all sorts of things. And that can explain why Chris Watts didn't want a high-profile trial, why he said nothing at his sentencing hearing. Also, why the crime was committed in the way that it was. No blood, no confrontation, hidden away, as introverts themselves do. They hide away. And of course, when he's interviewed, then he pretends that that's not the case. He's acting like he's not an introvert. When he does the polygraph, he's a lot more chatty than he normally is, and this was something highlighted by Trinastich, saying he's never this chatty. He's talking too much. He never talks this much. What's going on? They knew something was different. Law enforcement didn't necessarily know the baseline. And that's one of the things that I criticize with people who take one interview and say, we've got a baseline from him. No, you don't. That's not the baseline. The baseline is when he's not on camera, when he's not being interrogated, when he's when there's no camera around. That's the baseline, and that's the baseline that is hidden from us. So I'm going to be talking more about the baseline and also Chris Watts's psychology, and you can decide whether I'm talking nonsense, and maybe you can bring a psychologist to the live stream and they can decide the same thing. My counter to that will be, well, how well do you know this case? I'm sure you're an expert in your area, but are you an expert in this area? And that's the difference. You need to know the case inside out, do you? And if you do, well, what do you say then? So for those interested in the JonBenet series, there is content going up every second or third day, bonus content on Patreon only, on the $2 tier. So you can head to that if you're interested, if you've enjoyed the 50-part series. That's patreon.com/TCRS. There's also weekly coverage of the Lori Vallow case, going through the Dateline documentary and other things. And then a brand new series is dealing with the Ripper, and so far everyone has had high praise for the first episode. So if you're from the UK, head on to Patreon for that. You might find something on that case that you haven't seen elsewhere. And so bear in mind, I'll be talking about Chris Watts' psychology tomorrow in a live stream at I think it's 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, the usual time on a Sunday. If you've been thinking all along that Chris Watts is a covert narcissist, perhaps you've read a book about it, perhaps you've heard lots of people saying the same thing, well, come to the live stream tomorrow and you will see that assessment challenged. And you can decide whether the challenge is from an expert or from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. I hope you found this episode interesting. If you have, please subscribe to this channel. That's if you haven't subscribed already. I won't be doing too much of the Watts case going forward, but there will be definitely episodes here and there, to some extent dealing with your questions, your concerns, and certain confusion, things that need to be debunked. I will be dealing with that from time to time. You're welcome to communicate this to me. You can do that in the comments of the videos, or you can hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Crime Rocket. You can check that out. And any questions, comments that perhaps other people have made that you strongly agree with or disagree with, I might respond to some of them. I do want to more regularly do your questions episodes, and so if they're on Chris Watts, I'm happy to deal with that. If they're on the JonBenet Ramsey case, the same. But we are coming up on some other cases like Letitia Stork that might be coming up next month. So, and also Lori Vallow a couple of months after that, and we do need to do our due diligence covering those cases. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend wherever you are in the world. Stay warm, stay safe, and I'll see some of you guys tomorrow for the live stream at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. See you then.